Hello, Lisa here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. And today we are going to be doing a video response that's also called a VR to Tarot is Cozy. This is an old tag and it was Tarot of Exceptions. So this is basically the whole point of this tag is to share decks that sort of I break my own rules for. So things that I say I don't really like, but I've gotten these decks anyways that sort of break those rules. So these are my exception decks. This is a really fun tag. It was brought to mind because of a deck I was playing around with and I was like, wait, this is totally an exception to my usual rule. And I realized I've never done this tag. So I have my tablet next to me with the prompts that I made for myself so that I can keep myself on task. Let's get into all of the decks that I break my own rules for. So the one that started this off is Warpy Cardstock. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, I'm constantly complaining, specifically, I'm so sorry, Hay House, but I'm consistently complaining about Hay House's current cardstock. They used to have this really luscious, matte, glorious cardstock, really, really beautiful. Again, cardstock's subjective, but for whatever reason, the cardstock they've used lately over the past, I want to say at least year or two, has been very warpy. Like, I will get a brand new deck, put it aside, and pull it out, and it will warp. Now, warping is often due to humidity and things that the publisher can't control. So that's fine. It's not like they're picking this cardstock knowing it warps necessarily, but for some reason, it's just those decks that tend to just warp that drive me completely crazy, especially if I know I'm not using them a lot. So typically if a deck warps, I will end up rehoming it just because I just get like so frustrated with it, especially if I haven't been working with it a lot. But for the last couple of weeks, I have been playing with my Boo Tarot by Celia Melville. Now this is like arguably the most adorable ghosty tarot that could ever possibly be. And I also, this bag has little ghosties on it and they glow in the dark. I mean, I'm just saying. Here's the thing. I complain and complain and complain about this deck. It's not a Hay House deck. I brought up Hay House as an example of like cardstock I typically don't like. But the Boo Tarot has this like really weird cardstock. I've never had another deck that felt quite like this. Like, you can see the shape of it. It's taken on like this wavy shape that is pretty much conformed to the way that I riffle shuffle the cards. It is kind of floppy. It doesn't feel like it has a lot of structure. It's comfortable to shuffle, but it's unsatisfying. Like, it flops. And you can see, hopefully you can see it by the way I bend the cards. That's how it's warped. See how there's like a bit of an S-curve just because of how I hold them? My other decks don't do that. They have enough of a sturdiness or a structure that when I do this shape with my hands, it doesn't like conform to that shape, but these ones do. And like, you can really see it there. And then I shuffle. It's the most unsatisfying experience. And each individual card is now like completely deformed. However, this is a fabulous deck. It's very, very cozy. It's comforting. It is sweet, but it's Halloween spooky vibes. It's like literally there's a pumpkin spice latte. This deck is it's just lovely. And despite the cardstock issues, I have like been vocal about how much I don't like this cardstock, and yet, but I mean, she did make the majors have these like really cool sparkly effect, which I think is super fun. But regardless, the deck is so good that I just continue to overlook the cardstock and enjoy the deck. And I believe there is an oracle you can get for this, but I don't think I ever got, well, I didn't ever get the oracle. I love this Four of Pentacles so much. Oh my gosh. Celia Melville's art style is absolutely the best. I love it so much. Oops. But yeah, I love this deck. I love the depictions of the cards. I think it's really great. But the cardstock drives me batty. It really does. Batty. But this is just such a fun deck, and I've been working with this now. At the time you're seeing this, I'd been working with this deck in September. I just found that it was like kind of pre-spooky season. Like, it felt like there's something about it. I had the best reading where this card came up, and it was so fun. It literally made me laugh out loud. It's so good. It's such a great little deck. So yeah, cardstock and all, or as we might say another place, warts and all. I love this deck. I really, really do. I would love to see it come out on a different cardstock, but man, who knows? By the time it did, even if it did, by the time it did, I might be so bonded. I probably am already so bonded to this warpy mess that I wouldn't replace it anyway. But I do love this deck. It's really fun. And I love my little ghosty bag that it lives in. That is the Boo Tarot, and that is my exception to my warpy cardstock personal taste rule. Another cardstock issue I have is when I literally cannot riffle the cards. They literally won't bend, they're way too stiff or thick, or they really, really, really hurt. This is my forever exception to that rule. This is the textured tarot, and printed on something, at least it used to be, printed on something called Xanta box board. and it does not bend. In fact, the creator, I mean, it'll show me bending it like this, but it does not riffle. And in fact, whenever I've tried to riffle, I have a couple of times creased cards because they just kind of snap or fold. It does not bend. Like, that's quite a bit of pressure. I can drop them, but I cannot riffle them. That's it. Now, for a hand over hand, this is actually a lovely shuffle because it's very smooth. It slides over itself really nicely. It fans beautifully. So in that way, it's really, really nice, but it's not meant to be riffled. Oh, and I think I interrupted myself, but the creator actually had a disclaimer on their website or on their Etsy shop that this deck is not meant to be riffled. But I absolutely love this. It literally does have lots of textures in it. It's an enjoyable deck to read with. I've had and given so many good readings with this deck. I really felt like when it came out, it was doing something really different. You do see a lot of fabric kind of collage in the cards that I think is just really cool. And I love it. I really, really love this deck. So despite the fact that I cannot riffle shuffle it, it has remained a long-time favorite in my collection and one that I couldn't imagine parting with. I really do like it quite a bit. Yeah. I still find myself reaching for it despite the fact that I can't riffle it. And I know that sounds really shallow. The thing is, it's like riffling is such a part of the process. Like the shuffle is a meditative part of the process for me when I read. So not being able to shuffle the way that I normally do is kind of a big deal to me. Or if the shuffle feels uncomfortable or weird, it does matter. But yeah, this one is definitely an exception to that rule. Again, that's the textured tarot. I'm pretty sure this one's still in print. One quick note about this cardstock before I forget to say, though, as much as I'm complaining about it, I believe that one of the reasons for this cardstock is that it is fully like recyclable, compostable. There's no core in it that could prevent it from being recycled, apparently. So that's one of the perks, I guess, for using a cardstock like that. So it was clearly a well thought out decision on the part of the creator and like not necessarily a bad decision, just one that doesn't align with how I like to use, like what I like in my cardstock. Okay. The next exception is the Thoth Tarot. I'm not a Thoth girly. I'm really not. I'm not a Thoth girly, but I have two Thoth decks that I can't imagine ever parting with. One I've worked with, one I haven't. So I also have a classic Thoth just for reference. Now this one is the Asherah Tarot, and this is the pocket version of the deck. I really just fell in love with this. I just think it's really, really beautiful. It is a Thoth-based deck, but it does something cool with the colors and this kind of like mandala-like thing that happens in the minors that I really enjoy. I have worked with this. I have studied with this deck, and this is a poker size, and it's on like a beautiful linen cardstock. And it's great. I think it's really great. I found this more readable in a lot of ways than the original Thoth Tarot. It just probably because the art just excited me more. It felt more my speed, but it is very true to the Thoth. It's very true to the color story of the Thoth, which hopefully you can see, but it also does have these just beautiful mandala kind of things happening that I think do make it more special. And I really like it. I would say that this one is a little bit more going its own way. Like that's a little bit more Rider-Waite-Smith, if we're being honest. But for the most part, it stays pretty true to Thoth. I should say as somebody who is not at all a Thoth expert, but I did do a study of the Thoth. I do feel like I have a good grasp of it. It's just not really my preferred home system. But this deck is cool, and I'm glad I have it. I don't reach for it a lot, but if I were to ever feel called to the Thoth, this would definitely be one of my go-tos. And there is, I believe, a digital guidebook, but then there's also this like little Tree of Life card. There's some little keyword thingies that come with the deck that give you some more information about it. But that is the poker size. So this does also come, I believe, in a bigger size. I think it might be like more of an oracle size, or there's this one. There may be a tarot size as well. Somebody who knows can please feel free to share with us in the comments. But yeah, this is definitely a Thothy exception in my collection. The other Thothy exception in my collection is the Maria Tarot. This is just so beautifully produced. This is by Maja? I don't know how to say this. Kulinovic. Break out of your shell and free your soul. And one of the things that really makes this a standout for me is the book. But I have not worked with it. There is also an extra... Come on, out. There we go. There's an extra couple of lovers cards you can choose. And then there was a title card. There was also a fold-out reference sheet for the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, and a Deccan wheel, which is really cool. So I love that these are in here. But the guidebook for this, I think if you were interested in studying Thoth, I think this is just a really beautiful way to do it. Majid gives us enough information here to really tie it in. There's the astrology, the symbolism, the Tree of Life reference for every card. it's just really well done here, and I think takes you through the Thoth really beautifully. It's a nice guidebook. My copy of the deck itself is still in order, but this is on a beautiful 330 GSM playing card stock. It's just lovely. This one is a lot truer to the original Thoth, but it is repainted, and I just love this painting style. I think it's really, really gorgeous. But this one is much more like a classic Thoth in its own way. It really is just a repainting. But we've got the astrological information on here. I think this is really gorgeous. I fell in love with this when I saw this on Kickstarter, and I backed it immediately. Very, very high quality deck with a lot of depth in the artwork. It just brings Thoth to life, where the Thoth might feel... The Thoth artwork is really beautiful, don't get me wrong. Like, Lady Frida Harris's artwork is gorgeous, but this brings it to life a little bit for me. So if I were going to go back into a Thoth study, I would probably use this deck if I could. Like, look at that. I mean, it's just, her art is exquisite. It's absolutely breathtaking. And I feel like when there's art that is exciting, it just pulls you into the card more. Like, look at this tower. Why is the tower in the middle? I guess I must have shuffled it a little. Interesting. Oh yeah, it's been shuffled. I see. I didn't notice till just now when I saw the tower. That's funny. So I have shuffled. I must have worked with this a tiny bit. But yeah, love. Like, look at the Queen of Cups. She's so pretty. But these are the same symbols you'll find on the classic, on the Lady Frida Harris Crowley Thoth. But I just think this is beautiful, and I'm so glad to have it. So yeah, this is my Thoth baby. Another exception to my rule is collab decks. I really struggle with collab decks. I struggle for them to feel cohesive. I have one deck in storage that I keep because of memories and because I think it's a cool like collector's piece, and it's one of the 78 tarots. It's the 78 tarot mythical, but I still find that I never reach for it because the variance in art style just completely pulls me out of the world. It makes it hard for me to focus on the reading. Unlike the Last Unicorn Tarot, which is my exception. A lot of people don't realize that this is a collab deck, but it is. There were 5 different artists that worked on this deck. This is my baby. This was my first ever tarot Kickstarter. I think it was my second Kickstarter ever. My first Kickstarter was, I'm pretty sure, Exploding Kittens, the game. But anyway, I don't think you'd be able to tell that there are 5 different artists on this deck because they all really strove to illustrate the deck as closely to the movie's art style as they could. So these characters look like they came straight out of the movie. They did such an incredible job of really sort of pulling the movie artwork into the cards. And just, oh, one of the most powerful devil cards ever. I know this story backwards and forwards. I especially know the movie version backwards and forwards, though I have read the book as well multiple times. But this deck is so beautifully produced. I think you can still get this. It's by Geekify, but the original Kickstarter edition, like there was just extras, right? There was this beautiful box. We didn't pay anything extra for that. That was like an incredible stretch goal. It took forever though. I waited like 2 years after the Kickstarter for this deck to come out, partly because one of those 5 artists had like quit or something happened and they couldn't complete the art. So they had to find a replacement for that 5th artist. But this is collab. And I mean, I guess if I'm looking for it, I can kind of see it. Like that art style does feel a little different maybe than this one, but it never jumps out at me. Like that one has some things that kind of feel a little different. There's maybe like a heavier outline than something like that, but I don't typically notice it because they've all stayed really true to the characters in the movie. They're not trying to stylize them or do something different with them. And that alone makes it feel, it keeps me in the world of The Last Unicorn. But I absolutely adore this deck with it's one of my most treasured possessions. I absolutely love this. So yeah, collab deck or not, I am obsessed. And it doesn't feel collab-y. Like here, there's the white outlining. So these ones clearly have a very similar style, but look, they're in that's the Knight and the Queen of Wands from the same suit. So even though, actually, now I'm curious if all of the quartz have that style. Yes, all of the quartz have this kind of ribbony thing going on. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much cohesion. Like these were clearly artists that worked together like on a team to create this deck, and it wasn't like just a bunch of individuals making art, if that makes sense. And that cohesion comes through in the way that the deck is illustrated. It's just so well done. So yeah, that is the Last Unicorn Tarot, my exception to my collab deck rule. Okay, another rule is I don't like really, really, really boring, minimal pip decks. I at least like the pip deck to be visually interesting, to not be like really lazy in its pip design, which is why I think a lot of the Inside Edition decks don't end up working out for me. But I totally purchased the Spoopy Tarot, and this is new for me, but I do really love it. And this is about as boring of a pip as we can get. Like it's pretty, it's so basic. It literally looks like emojis. Like it doesn't get much more basic than this, right? Like it's pretty, it's very, very basic. So this is definitely me breaking my own rule, and I did it intentionally. I knew exactly what this deck was when I purchased it. Now, I am not a big fan, though, of companies that put out pip decks and you don't know it's a pip deck till you're unwrapping it. Like, that's not cool, man. And in fairness, I don't even know. Does this show us? Yeah, they show you. See, they show you a major arcana, a court card, and a numbered minor. So you know immediately what the style is of the entire deck, which I really, really applaud, because a lot of publishers seem to like only show us court cards and major arcana, and so if you don't see a numbered minor arcana, you don't know what you're getting into. This is so cute. It's still in order because I literally just got it and showed it in a different video that I recorded. I don't know when this video is coming out, but I'm recording it at the same time I recorded the recent deck roundup where I got this deck. But anyway, that is definitely an exception to my boring pips deck rule. Now I do have a couple of pip decks. I like pip decks. I really enjoy working with them, and in fact make a point to have a few in my collection. But this one is probably the most like basic of my pip decks. So that breaks that rule. Next up is muted colors. I do think I have a couple decks that break this rule, but this one is, I think, probably the most sort of soft muted color palette deck in my collection of a deck that I truly love. This is the Ink Witch Tarot by Eric Mayle, or Maley. I still don't know how to pronounce Eric's last name. I should really find out one of these days. I'm so sorry, Eric. I keep mentioning that and then not doing anything about it. So this is really lovely. And all of the colors are this very sort of soft, like very soft, earthy kind of tones. There's no gem tones in this deck. There's no bright colors. It's all very soft and pulled back. I do have a couple decks, I would say. That's probably one of the bolder cards in the deck with that rich sort of chocolatey brown there. But the whole thing is very, very light, almost like a wash of color everywhere. It's definitely an aesthetic, but I like this deck a lot. I think it's really different, and it feels very soothing to work with, and I really enjoy the guidebook. So, and this was a very customizable deck because there's like these expansions where you can kind of customize it and to sort of have your perfect version, and I love that about it. But yeah, that is the Ink Witch Tarot, and that is breaking my rule about not really liking muted color palettes. I also kind of don't usually like decks that are overly positive in the sense where they try to take the real meanings of tarot and kind of gloss them over or make them seem more positive than they are. And so a deck that I have that definitely breaks that rule is the Guardian Angel Tarot by Radleigh Valentine. It was originally by Radleigh Valentine and Doreen Virtue, but my copy is one of them, just has Radleigh Valentine on the name. This is like my grandma deck. I talk about this all the time. This is my mainstay in my bedtime tarot practice, and truly every single one of these cards takes the meaning of the tarot, doesn't lie about it, definitely says this is what it means, but here's how it's all going to be okay. It's a very soothing sort of pep talk kind of deck, and while I don't think that it masks the meaning of the card in order to make it positive, it definitely has a positive spin on every card. It definitely is it gives you the empowerment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think there's a time and a place for decks like this. I haven't yet found a different deck like this that I would want to use or keep in my collection that I can think of. Typically, I go to tarot to kind of have my butt kicked. That's sort of what I like in tarot. I like that it can call me out. I like that it can kind of give me that constructive criticism and help me grow. But this is a deck that is there to calm my nerves and make me feel better when I'm struggling, and it's perfect for that, and I love it so much. But I couldn't see for myself wanting to have a lot of decks like this in my collection. At the same time, a deck like this is wonderful as an accompaniment to that more hard kind of kick butt kind of work, and I'm really grateful to have it. So that is the Guardian Angel Tarot. This one is out of print now. I'm sure there's very, very similar decks you can get though. The next rule I have is Rider-Waite-Smith clones, and I do have a couple of these, but the one that is the most cloney of all of my clones is this one, and this is the Winter Weight Santa's Helper edition. It is my holiday Christmas themed deck. I also have actually in here the little Cottage Witch expansion so that I can remember to use it in the holiday time. But this is Krista's Cottage Witch. I forget what it's called. The Winter Holiday little goodie pack. Anyway, I have that in there because I want to use it around Christmas time. But this is the only Christmassy deck that I have, and I really love it. It's got like pink candy cane sort of stripes on the back, and it is literally a Rider-Waite-Smith clone deck, but just Christmased. It's Christmasified. And I just think it's super fun. And I look forward to working with it every year, which is weird for me to say because typically when a deck looks too much like the Rider-Waite-Smith like this, I end up letting it go. I end up kicking it out of my collection. But this is so fun and so Christmassy and holiday spirits. And I mean, Santa as the Emperor. I mean, it's fabulous. There's a lot of also pinks and purples and colors like that show up throughout this particular version. The first edition of the Winter Weight I didn't really love, and the editions that came out after this one have like different kinds of sparkly overlays on them, and I find those sparkly overlays to be very distracting and difficult to work with. You do have an option for Jack Frost instead of the traditional Death card, which I love, so I put that in my deck. Oh, no, I guess I have both of them in. I do. I have both Jack Frost and the Death card shuffled in. But in any case, I love reading with this. I've read with it every winter since I got it in, and I love it. When I am in the festive mood, this is what I pull out, and I just think it's super fun. It's basically just a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but I really, really enjoy it. And this year, I'll also have the Cottage Witch cards to have as like a little accompanying oracle to go along with, and I love that. So yeah, this is my little Christmas deck. But that is my exception to my Rider-Waite-Smith clone rule. The next rule is, I'm going to call this cool kid decks. And it's not that I like specifically don't like them. It's that I keep thinking I like them and then I get them and I find out I don't like them. And for me, cool kid decks are decks that are like funky or collage or they're like really, really quirky. I always want to love these decks. And then I get excited about them and I bring them in. I'm like, this is going to be my cool kid deck. And then I get it in and I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. It's got to go. Every single time. It's like the She-Wolf Tarot or even the Ritual Tarot, which I have and I do love. It's just, it never quite connects long term. Like I end up liking them, but then I don't reach for them until I got the Scarab and Dahlia Tarot. This was sent to me by the creator, and like I legitimately, I think I told this story, but I was like, I even told the creator, I was like, I don't think this one's for me. And then I ended up falling in love with it when I saw it in a walkthrough, and I replied to her again. I was like, actually, I think it might be for me. If you're okay with me taking a chance. And so anyway, she did send it to me, and I did absolutely fall in love with it. And guys, I think this is my cool kid deck. I think I actually finally get it. And I've been talking about it that way, but this is collage, but it is very cohesive and spacious are the best words I can think of to describe this. It's collage, but it's very purposeful. It's very contained. It's not wild and all over the place. Every card makes perfect sense. It pulls in the Rider-Waite-Smith meanings really beautifully and effectively, and yet it goes its own way. And I finally feel like I can be one of the cool kids. It just makes me happy. So yeah, this definitely breaks my quirky cool kid deck rule because I really never thought I was going to find one. Like I tried the Lioness Oracle Tarot. There's so many decks that a lot of them are collage. The Practical Magic Tarot, I really wanted to love that one and just couldn't get on with it. Even like quirky painted decks like the, what's it called? The one that was headless and now it's not headless. It's now called like the Artist Tarot. That one didn't end up working out for me long term. Anyway, but this one seems to be really working out for me, and I've been loving it. I've been really enjoying working with it. I haven't been stumped when I pull a card. It's just been really, really good. Can't recommend it enough. If you're one of those people like me who's like, I don't get these cool kid decks, this one might be good for you too. But it is the Scarab and Dahlia, and that broke my I'm never going to have one of those quirky cool kid deck rules. This next rule is more something I used to say than that's something I say anymore, because I think I've discovered that I actually really do like this, but glossy cards. I think initially I stopped liking glossy cards because they're difficult to photograph, and I do a lot of readings or to video, and I do a lot of readings for clients. And so it is actually frustrating when I'm filming a video for a client reading and the glare just makes it hard to see what's on the card. Like that is actually a problem. So I don't have a lot of glossy cardstock decks, and I tend not to keep them or repurchase them in matte if they come out in matte, just because they're more practical for me and the way I work with my cards. But if I'm being real with you, I like the look of glossy cards. I really do. I think the glossy cards, the colors pop more. I think the colors are truer. And probably my favorite glossy deck is this one. This is the Tarot of Mystical Moments. The other one, is there another one I can think of off the bat? No, but I love, love, love the Tarot of Mystical Moments. It is very shiny glossy. It's that really like high shine gloss. But yeah, I think it really suits this deck well. I think the colors are just gorgeous. And yes, there's a ton of glare. Even though I've used this deck a lot, it's never going to scuff up. Well, I shouldn't say never. It's seen a lot of use and it still hasn't scuffed up to be like less glare, you know. But I think it also helps that I've got a better lighting system now for my table. So like as you can see, just laying them out, they're not really picking up glare. oh, see, if I put them too far back, they will, because my lights are back in the back. But like towards the front part of my reading table, it's okay. But man, I love this deck. It's so beautiful, and I don't think I'd want this one to be matte. I mean, I'd eat my words probably if it came out in a really luscious matte, but I think the gloss suits it well. I think it was the right choice, and I think it's really pretty this way. And sometimes glossy cards just give it a different feel. They almost feel like luxurious, and they feel, maybe it's because so many of my decks are matte that the gloss stands out as special when I have it, but maybe that's what it is. But back in the day, they were pretty much all kind of glossy, or at least semi-gloss. And I remember when I had the Unicorn Oracle, the first copy I had for years and years was glossy, and I kind of liked that because it felt almost like photos. Now I have the matte version. I still like it, and I use it more because it's matte. But I kind of almost sometimes miss the glossy version, if I'm being honest. So yeah, this is my exception to, trying to mostly avoid glossy cardstock. But this one is such a good deck that it's so good. I also say that I'm not into creepy decks. And like, if you know my collection, or if you've seen me do collection videos, if you've seen me talk about lots of decks on my channel, you probably know I have leaning towards bright colors and cute and pops of sort of play and fun and lightheartedness. There's a lot of that in my collection, but there are a couple super creepy decks that work really, really, really powerfully and well for me. And I don't think either of these will be a surprise if you've watched my channel for a bit, but the first one is, of course, the Deviant Moon Tarot. So many people don't like this deck, and I was one of them for a very long time, but this is a top tier deck for me in my collection. It really helped to teach me. This was probably the first deck I had that really started showing me unequivocally the shadow meaning of some of the cards, where I didn't need to like see it reversed and then look at it in a guidebook. I could literally just see it in the artwork, and I really appreciate that about this deck. This is my #1 butt-kicking shadow work deck. I use it for that all of the time. It's not the only way that I use this deck, but it comes up that way in my practice a lot. It's a powerful deck. It's a visually stunning deck. I think it's one of those things where there's a quality to this artwork that is unlike anything else, and that makes it stand out. Now, with this being said, because I love this deck so much, I have tried to love other Patrick Valencia decks, and none of them have stayed. Not the Marseille one, which I still think is really beautiful, but just couldn't stick with it. Even the Mildred Payne Pocket Oracle, I used that for a long time, but ultimately it left. All the other Patrick Valencia stuff just ends up being too creepy for me still. But this one, for whatever reason, has just worked and worked and worked, and it has never faded at all. But arguably, it's quite creepy. So that is the Deviant Moon, and I love it, and it's the best. Another deck that I don't personally see as super creepy, but I think objectively is pretty creepy, is the Nicoletta Ciccoli Tarot. Is that what it's actually? Yeah, just Nicoletta Ciccoli Tarot. This, I have 2 copies of this. I have this copy, and I also have the little pocket version, and I also have the Oracle. Nicoletta Ciccoli's artwork is often described as sort of creepy doll artwork, and there is definitely a lot of shadow in her artwork, and that is where it functions in my practice, but more specifically is really good for unpacking like childhood trauma for me personally. I'm not saying this is going to work for everybody, but it helps me to sort of see the toxicity beneath the sweetness, which can sometimes be difficult for me. Arguably, I am very like, rose-colored glasses tend to see the best in everybody until I have no choice, and so this deck can help me navigate, especially those times when I feel like I'm coming face to face with stuff that I really wasn't prepared for because I didn't allow myself to be prepared for it. So this can help me navigate that kind of thing. And I think it's just the perfect thing to have in my toolkit as a sort of Page of Cups personality, to have a deck that's like, okay, we're going to take those rose-colored glasses right off and like show you that beneath the layer of like adorable or sweet looking, there's all this like sort of sinister energy that can lie underneath that. So you need to be aware of it and open your eyes and be willing to see it. This is really helpful for that for me. But a lot of people just, this deck creeps them right out because it does have that sort of like spooky doll kind of aesthetic to it. But I absolutely adore it. It's been a very, very powerful deck and serves a really important part, a really important function, I guess you could say, in my collection. Another sort of personal aesthetic type rule, I guess you could say, that I have is that I don't typically feel drawn towards decks that have a very, I should say, artsy or like historically artsy or old-fashioned, I don't know, old-fashioned isn't quite the word, antiqued or very grown-up, like serious kind of vibe. That's not really my thing. I do, though, have a few exceptions of decks that I think are very, very powerful and really, really good, that totally fall into that aesthetic. So those exceptions are, number one, my all-time favorite Robert M. Place deck, which is the Tarot of the Alchemical Magnum Opus. This deck is incredible. I really, really like it, and I find it a lot easier to work with than some of his other decks, which are packed full of symbolism, don't get me wrong, but this one strips it back, and this is an example actually of a pip deck that I truly, truly love and find it has a lot of depth. So Robert M. Place, I would say, is much more well-known for the, I think it's the Sevenfold Mysteries, Tarot of the Sevenfold Mystery or something like that, and the Alchemical Tarot. But this deck, that's what the backings look like. This deck is based on the principles of alchemy and has aspects of those other decks in it, but in a very like stripped back, simple, straightforward kind of way. And the majors have been renamed after their alchemical processes. So instead of death, we have putrefaction, right? And even though it's pips, there's these hints of the Rider-Waite-Smith in each one. So it's one of those really cool pip slash Rider-Waite-Smith hybrids in the minors. But also in the teeny little guidebook here, you get these like beautiful little bits of alchemy, and it's so cool. So I feel like if you're somebody who tends to be like overwhelmed by alchemy, this would be such a great deck to dip into. And I do have, I don't know if this is still available actually, but I would assume it is. But if it is, like, I'll try to have everything linked down below. But I do have Robert M. Place's big book, which I think has been revised, but it is the Tarot, Alchemy, Hermeticism, Neoplatonism. It's that book. Really, really good. Really good. Like distillation for temperance, circulation for the Wheel of Fortune, crucified serpent for the Hanged One, coagulation for the devil, baptism for the star. And then we also, of course, have like the white and red, white queen and red king, yeah, represented in this deck as well. Really good. Philosopher's Stone. Yeah, it's really good. So I absolutely love this. I would not say this is a Marseille deck. I wouldn't even call this a straight pip deck. It's like an alchemy pip deck, kind of. I don't know. It fills a really unique spot in my collection, and I absolutely adore this deck, and would be the only deck I personally recommend for somebody who's just initially interested in learning a little bit more about alchemy, because I think it's very straightforward and easy to wrap your head around without as much of the extra symbology that can kind of muddy it for a bit if you're new to it. And the other deck in this category that I think breaks that rule is the Tarot Emblemata. I don't know what this deck in my long-term future are, but I really enjoy this deck quite a bit. This is what the backings look like. I think I fell even more in love with this deck when I did a Let's Play with my members where we were playing with charm casting and mixing it with cards. And this was such a great companion for that work. It worked so well. But this has got basically emblems from manuscripts and such paired with Latin sayings, and it's a lot of this comes from one specific manuscript that I could remember if I looked it up, but I don't know off the top of my head. And a lot of these are just so heavily like obviously tarot, like Queen of Swords, an intelligent unbiased soul, the sun, this age knoweth the creator aright. And there's all the Latin on here too, which if you want to work with Latin for magic work or whatever is really great. But I really enjoy this. I haven't yet pulled this, I would say, for like a big reading, like a big spread. But I love the Latin. I love the emblems. I love how it all kind of ties together to create a cohesive tarot meaning. I really like it. I think it's well done. But this is, again, not at all normally my aesthetic. But I feel like this and the Tarot of Alchemical Magnum Opus would actually work well, like, in combination, for sure. So that'd be fun. I haven't done that yet, but that breaks that rule. And the last rule that I wrote down that I have an exception to is I don't typically like black and white or basically monochromatic decks. And one really good exception, I have a couple of exceptions, but I'm going to show just one today, is the Papez Oracle. Oh my gosh. This is literally black and this kind of cream color. This is such a powerful deck. It's really, really good. It has these like monochromatic illustrations paired with these incredible keywords. And if you go onto they actually have a standalone book you can get for this now, I think, that they did on Kickstarter. I didn't end up getting it. I was going to, because there's actually a poem that goes with every single one of these cards. The reason I didn't get it, though, is because I really enjoy working with these cards intuitively, and I worry that the poems, which I did look at on their website, where they have a digital guidebook, basically, the poems, I think, might box this deck in too much for me. But I love these keywords and these images in combination. I think they're really, really powerful. I think they work really well. This is a deck that is such a versatile one and gets really into the space of like feeling and emotion and relating and experiencing in a really powerful way. And I don't really notice the monochromaticness of it, but it's got this beautiful rose petal finish to it, like really soft, kind of smooth rose petal. And I feel like if I ever wanted to, I could always like add pops of color into these cards, like some markers. I don't think I will though. I think I just really like it exactly as it is. So yeah, that is the Papez, and it breaks my monochromatic deck kind of typical rule. All right, y'all. These were my tarots of exceptions, or tarot of exceptions. I think it's tarots of exceptions. I'll have the hashtag right in that thing. But this was a Vieira de Tarot is Cozy who did this, created this tag, I think over a year ago now, maybe longer. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. This was really, really fun to do. I hope you're having a beautiful day. As always, an extra big thank you goes out to my Unicorn Fam channel members. Thank you so much for supporting my work here. And to all of you, please be sure to like, subscribe, do all the things. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.